Welcome to this week's virtual Drasha. This week we have the incredible privilege to read Parsha Shoftim. And towards the end of the Parsha, the Torah begins to launch into the discussion regarding war. And in fact, this discussion carries over into next week's Parsha as well, where the Torah discusses the idea that when the Jewish army goes out to war, not only are there physical preparations, not only are there strategic preparations, but there are spiritual preparations as well. There is a Kohen Mashuach Milchama, a Kohen who was anointed for the sole purpose of going out with the army to war. And it is his job that prior to the soldiers entering into the thick of the battle, to give them words of chizuk, to give them words of strength, to give them words of inspiration, words of optimism. But the Kohen also does something very interesting. As the army is assembled, ready to go out to battle, the Kohen goes ahead and makes an announcement, or a series of announcements, announcing all of the individuals who are exempt from going out to battle and are in fact commanded to go back home. The Torah says, this is in Perek Chaf Pasuk Hey, chapter 20, verse 5. V'dibru hashotrim ela am lemor. The shotrim, the officers, would go ahead and announce to the nation. And Rashi explains the Kohen, Mashuach Milchama, the Kohen, who was job it was to lead the army out into war, he would make the announcements and the officers would repeat it. And they would say as follows. They would issue a series of exemptions. Mia ish asher bana bayis v'lo chanacho. Who is the person who has built a home but has not yet dedicated it? Meaning he's built a home but he hasn't lived in it yet. Yelech v'yeshuv lebeso. He should go back home to his home. Penyamas b'milchama. Perhaps he will die in war. V'ish achar yachnechenu. And someone else will live in it. And then the Torah goes on and says, who is the person who has planted a vineyard but has not yet enjoyed its fruit? Go home. Enjoy your vineyard, lest you die in battle. Someone else go ahead and take over the vineyard. Who is the man who got married but did not yet live with his wife? Go home, lest the soldier die in battle and another man marry his widow. So on a most basic level, the way we understand these exemptions is that in order to be successful on the battlefield, a person has to have a clear mind. Or when I say a clear mind, a person has to have a singular focus. When I'm on the battlefield, it's all about the battle. There could be no distractions. I can't be thinking about anything else. I can't be thinking about my home. I can't be thinking about my vineyard. I can't even be thinking about my wife. The only thing I need to be thinking about on the battlefield of life is how to properly and practically engage the enemy, be successful. That's it. Anything else is a distraction. So the Torah Kadosh understands that certain people are distracted. You built a new home, you didn't live in it. You built a vineyard, you didn't enjoy the fruit. You got married, but you did not yet live with your wife. These are distractions, understandable distractions. And therefore the Torah Kadosh says, go home. Thank you for coming. Thank you for showing up. Go home. But the tzaddik, the Ora Meir, Rav Zev Wolf of Zitomir, who passed away in 1797. The Rebbe was one of the primary Talmidim, one of the primary disciples of the Maggid of Mezrich. He says something amazing. He says, "V'tzarach lahavin." He says, you just have to understand. Lefia klal hamunach biadinu shatorit midos. We know the principle that governs our understanding of Torah is eternal, which means that every detail in Torah has an eternal, and I should say, contemporary message. V'yeshna b'chol adam b'chol zman. Every aspect of the Torah applies to every person at every time. Eich shayich ata mikrai kodesh elu. How do these psukim, what do these verses, what message do they convey to us? These are the laws of war. These are laws, and again, important laws of war, and it's fascinating to read them, and fascinating to learn them and to study them. But what practical message do they contain for us contemporarily? And the Rebbe leaves it at that. But comes on Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. And the Rebbe says something beautiful. And for today, I'm just going to draw your attention to this first pasuk. Who is the man who has built a home, but has not yet dedicated it, has not yet lived in it? Go back. And the Rebbe says there is a profound life message embedded in these words. I'm going to read it to you. The Rebbe says, Mia isha sher bana bayis. Who is the person who has built a home, but has not yet lived in it? V'lo chanacho. Now, interestingly enough, lo chanacho means he hasn't dedicated it. So if you think about it, Amir Hashem, a person is zocha to build a home or buy a home. You move in, and what do? You do a Chanukah Sabayis, a dedication of the home. That's Chanukah, and that Chanukah Sabayis is like the solidification of my entry into this new home. When I do my Chanukah Sabayis, I'm moved in. Now it's mine. Chinuch Chanukah means to dedicate something, really means to unlock the potential of something. It's the completion. It's the end of the process. I move into a new home. I make a Chanukah Sabayis. This is now my home. So Rabbi Nachman says something absolutely startling. He says, Perish. He says, what does it mean a home? He says a home doesn't just mean a home. It doesn't just mean a domicile. It doesn't just mean a house, a structure. He says the home sometimes refers to the following. Pirish, shehischil lahanhig as atzmo banhaga chadasha bavodasi yizbarach. So the Rebbe says something amazing. The phrase asher bana bayis means a person who has begun something in life. You've begun to build something. Not necessarily a physical structure. I've begun to build something in life. We build things all of the time. I want to build a new behavior. I want to build a new lifestyle. I want to build a new midah, a new character trait. I want to build a new relationship. Mia ish asher bana bayis. Who is the person who has begun building something in life? V'lo chanacho. What does it mean for lo chanacho? Says the Rebbe. Shelo gamru. You started something, but you didn't finish it. Right? He says, Kimo, she'osin chanukas habayis achar hagimar. Just like when you finish your physical home, you make a chanukas habayis to highlight the idea that now the home is complete, my move-in is complete. Who is the person who started something in life? What structure did you start creating in your life? What relationship? What lifestyle? What avenue of personal growth? What project? What initiative? What dream? What aspiration have you started with in life? But you haven't finished it. So what happens if you start something in life and you haven't finished it? So the Kohen says to the soldiers, Yelech v'yashuv lebeso. Go back home and finish up what you started. Says Rabbi Nachman, this is the eternal message of the pasuk. The stated meaning, if you're a soldier, we need you to be focused. We can't allow you to be distracted. So if you built a home, you haven't lived in it yet, you're going to be thinking about your house. You're going to be thinking about all the finishes, all the beautiful comfort. Go home. You're not an asset to the war effort. What's the eternal message? Says Rabbi Nachman, Mia ish asher bana bayis. Have you started something in life? V'lo chanacho, but you haven't finished it? If that's you, Yelech v'yashuv lebeso. Go back home and finish what you started. And what an incredible yesod. And what a powerful yesod, what a powerful message for Chodesh Elul. Because for many of us, this is a reflective month. A month where we begin to go ahead and plan for the year ahead. But more important than kind of the forward-thinking aspect of Elul is the retrospective aspect of Elul. What did I do this year? Or sometimes it's better stay, well, of course I have to focus on what I did. What didn't I do this year? And if you're like me, there's like a million things that I started that I haven't finished. Why didn't I finish them? If I kind of open up my life, there are thousands of partially built structures. I started this bias, didn't finish it, moved on to something else. I started this bias, and I lost interest. I lost the new bias smell, so I moved on to something else. I started on this initiative, this dream, this aspiration, this goal. But how many things did I really bring to the finish line? And the nature, human nature is such that we start on something, we're excited about it, and then often over time we just lose interest for a variety of different reasons. So we move on to something else. Something else catches my attention span. We have very shortened attention spans in the times in which we live. I start, lose interest, move on to something else. And so if I look at the panoramic view of my life, there's like a whole housing complex of partially built homes. I started on this okay, move on to something else. I started on this project, move on to something else. I started building or maybe rebuilding this relationship, move on to something else. Mia isha shebana bayis. Who is the person who has built a home v'lo chanacho, but has not finished it? Who is that person? That person is me. That person is me, with a whole bunch of partially built life structures. And the Kohen Gadol whispers in our ear, Yelech v'yashuv lebeso. Go home and finish what you started. Do you know what Chodesh Elul is? Part of Chodesh Elul is identifying the partially built structures, identifying the partially built batim, identifying the things that I started on but have not yet finished, and then to realize, go back home. Go back and finish what you started. Go back and complete the house. Go back and finish off the bias. What a way to end out the year. to, number one, find the courage to identify those housing complexes that belong to each of us that have a whole bunch of partially built homes. And the truth is, sometimes we start building and we stop for good reason, because maybe I realize it's not the right thing to build, or it's not the right time to build. That's okay. It's okay to pivot to other things. But sometimes I just stop because I stop. Torah Kedosha tells us, Elul tells us, identify the partially built structures. Identify the things you have started but have not yet completed. And identify the ones that really are worth the Chanukah Sabayis, that are really worth bringing to the finish line. Sink your teeth into those and finish the job. May we be Zochem Yirtzeh Hashem to internalize this most important message of the battle of life. May we Zochem Yirtzeh Hashem to return back to our partially built structures. Find the koach to finish building them. Make this a successful Elul. And in Yirtzeh Hashem go into the new year with our fully built dreams, aspirations, goals, and initiatives. Wishing everyone a wonderful Erev Shabbos and a Guten Shabbos Kodesh.